Meet the Schoolboy Storyteller. For his 9th birthday, Frasier Cox's parents gave him a copy of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. They were desperate to unleash their son's creativity and imagination, for although he had always loved reading, he was fascinated by non-fiction books almost to the point of obsession. But never once did Carina and her husband David think that their birthday gift would lead Frasier to follow in author Roald Dahl's footsteps. Yet that is what has happened. As Frasier's first book hits stores this week, the 10-year-old, who was diagnosed with autism shortly after his 9th birthday, is already hard at work on his second. It was in the same year he received his diagnosis that Frasier wrote There's a Little Boy the Same as Me. Last year it won the Book People's Bedtime Story competition, making him one of the UK's youngest published authors. Described by head judge Claudia Winkleman as incredibly touching and thought-provoking, Frasier's children's story is based on an imaginary friendship with a boy who has the same interests and childhood hopes as he does, only he's a refugee. Reading his prize-winning book, it soon becomes clear that what made this young writer stand out above the other 1,300 competition entries is his high degree of empathy, a trait which is even more obvious when you talk to him. My story originated as a piece of homework about a year ago, explains Frasier, who goes to a state primary school in Brighton. We had to write a story about diversity and I chose to do it on refugees because I have always been passionate about the subject. This started because my mum does donations and some of my old things got donated. I was wondering where they were going and why they were needed. She explained why the refugees had to leave their homes and I thought that was really unfair. It was quite a reality check. I think the way we treat refugees has lots of room for improvement. I want to help in every way I can. I felt that writing a story was a good way of expressing that. Frasier's book takes a complex moral issue and simplifies it masterfully, something that the authors he most admires have done. I started off with Roald Dahl and now I am a huge fan of Michael Morpurgo, he explains, adding that he wrote his story to remind us that we are all human. He was particularly upset when he researched videos of migrant camps, such as the one in Calais. The conditions are just awful. Instead of trying to help them find a new home, they are classed as asylum seekers and dumped in some silly camp. The locations were really bad and some of the homes were basically just like a shed or a big tent. This isn't how we should be treating humans, not just refugees but humans in general. Throughout the writing of the story I put myself in their shoes and thought maybe they could be me. His prize was to see his story illustrated by Alison Brown, her work is below, and made into a real book. He also received £250 worth of books for himself and the same for his school. He is already working on his next book, a story about Larry, the top mouser at number 10 Downing Street. Those are quite old buildings, so Larry has an important job to do, he explains. It's at the concept stage at the moment. It's not really about politics, although it might have hidden messages. Shortly before Frasier's first birthday, when he began speaking in full sentences, Carina and David realized their son was advanced for his age. But while he could happily point out that Grandma's driving the car today from his infant car seat, the little boy wasn't hitting any of the normal physical developmental milestones. Even after various tests, it wasn't until he was 9 that he was diagnosed as having a variant of autism, in his case an exceptional intellect coupled with coordination challenges. He now has the support of a special education needs coordinator, SENCO, at school, as well as sessions with an occupational therapist and a physiotherapist to help him cope with his dyspraxia, a neurological disorder that affects an individual's ability to plan and process motor tasks. His class at school are really accepting of him, says Carina, 29, who has 2 other children, Kaylee, 6 and Leiden, 5. The biggest challenge for Frasier is his anxiety. My other children have disabilities and he cares very deeply and worries greatly about them. Kaylee was born with part of her bladder missing and Leiden was premature and suffers from epilepsy. Calming Frasier down is important, but he also has a high level of compassion. He is particularly pleased that money from the sale of his books is going to charity. That makes him feel he is doing something about the situation and gives him confidence. Carina, a medical student, says that she and David, 35, an architectural technologist, first realized that their son was a talented writer when he wrote a letter to Father Christmas in 2016. It was an amazing letter and, again, about refugees. Frasier had donated a particular teddy but then he changed his mind and asked for it back. He then wrote to Father Christmas saying that he didn't think he should have done that, saying please give my presents to Syrian children instead. He has a level of understanding beyond his age and when it comes to politics and history he is able to grasp concepts more readily than many children. He has always loved reading but it was all Wikipedia pages. He has always loved a fact. When he was about to turn 9 his parents decided to broaden his horizons by buying him some books by Roald Dahl. His anxiety runs very high, part of his autism, but he also has an unusual degree of compassion, says Carina. We wanted to spark his creativity. His first book appears to be the blending of Frasier's very real social concerns and his newfound interest in fiction. We knew the story he had written was special but because the competition was for a bedtime story we weren't sure if the subject matter would be too dark, adds his mother. We are super proud of him. To order a copy of Frasier Cox's book There's a Boy Just Like Me, go to bookpeople.co.uk/boyjustlike. 35% of sales will be donated to Save the Children, Talented and Tender. A sample of Frasier's wise and touching words. There's a little boy who's just like me. We like eating sweets and climbing trees. We both have brown hair, and gaps in our teeth. We've both got 10 fingernails with dirt underneath. But sadly, our lives are just not the same. We don't share a language, I don't know his name. Where I live is peaceful, a nice place to be. But he has no home. He's a refugee. His home was destroyed as his country's at war. It's not safe for him or his friends anymore. We're strangers and each has a different life. He faces worry, and sadness, and strife. As humans we share an incredible link. And, although we are different, I definitely think his family and people are misunderstood. If we could find friendship our world would be good.